Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Amy Culverhouse, Head of Growth for Europe here at BetterWorks, and I hope you're all enjoying all of the content today, and we have much more to come. This session is all about transformation done right, and we couldn't ask for a better guide than Abbas, Vice President of People at HelloFresh. I'm sure many of you know HelloFresh. I know we had many excited Better Workers when we started conversations with them 18 months or so ago. Personally, I became familiar with HelloFresh during lockdown, probably like many other people, when I lived alone, and it gave me a sense of purpose around my meals and also just gave me something to do, to be quite honest. But HelloFresh didn't just popularize meal kits, they fundamentally changed how people engage with food by making it more simple, accessible, and fun, and of course, tasty too, should be on that list. And under Abbas's leadership, that same spirit of reinvention has been brought to their people strategy. So at HelloFresh, Abbas leads the people function across international markets, whilst also overseeing HR for the company's German headquarters and global functions, including tech. And Abbas has teams spanning continents and cultures, and he's been instrumental in shaping a cohesive, forward-looking people strategy that really champions performance, adaptability, and growth. But Abbas's career didn't start at HelloFresh. So before HelloFresh, he held senior HR leadership roles at companies like AT&T, PacNet Group, and Global Fashion Group. And he's led transformations at scale, advised and invested in HR tech startups, and served on multiple boards. You've done a lot, Abbas. In short, he knows what it takes to turn ambitious people strategies into real-world impact. So in this conversation today, Abbas will share his insights into why so many transformation efforts fall short and what it really takes to see them through. He'll speak candidly about the challenges, the lessons, and the leadership needed to drive sustainable change, including how HelloFresh partnered with BetterWorks to modernize performance management and really embed it into the rhythm of everyday work. I speak to HR professionals all day, every day, hopefully some familiar faces on the other end of the screen right now, that are looking to do exactly this. So I know everyone joining us today is going to love this session. So please join me in welcoming Abbas. Abbas, how are you doing today?
Very good, Amy. Thank you. Although a bit nervous that I'm not going to be able to live up to that introduction.
Well, I know you are. We've obviously met a few times over the years, and most recently at HR Tech. So I know we might even have some familiar faces from there. So lots of things to discuss today. So let's get started. I think our starting point, we would love to hear and kind of look back more on the transformation journey that HelloFresh has been through. So if you could teleport 3 years into the past, and if you could do that, I think you'd be a very rich person because you'd have invented time travel. But if you could, and stand here today, what would you tell yourself about the transformation that you saw was needed at HelloFresh?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And I think with a company like HelloFresh, it's very useful to understand the context of the company itself and where it comes from. So I'll keep it short, but essentially HelloFresh was founded in 2011. It became sort of a unicorn, billion-dollar valuation startup scale-up in 2015, IPO'd in 2017, and the business was an excellent business, $1 billion plus in revenue, profitable, very, very solid. And then COVID happened. And then from 2019 to 2021, within sort of 24 months, the revenue tripled from about 2 billion euros to 6 billion euros.
Wow.
And the workforce multiplied as well. So, I mean, in these situations with a young company, what you usually have is you have sort of startup or mid-size company-focused people practices, people tools. You go into hyper growth mode, and then you're very focused on bringing people into the door and sort of having them deliver what's needed for the customers, quite literally in our case. And then you sort of have a situation where the company scales to a point where the existing people practices, processes, systems aren't really able to scale to the extent that the business has scaled and the workforce has scaled. So we sort of found ourselves in that situation at the end of 2021, early 2022. I think I joined the company at that time, but so did many others across different parts of the business, because our management sort of knew that a different sort of phase of the company was starting and different types of talent was needed. And at that point, I think HelloFresh was very interesting because it was a business which was run predominantly on a market model. So every country was operating quite independently. There were not a lot of global business processes or synergies. There were no global people systems. There were no global people data reports or analytics that were coming out of the box. It was all sort of manually put together, and the business was being run with that way. And that's perfectly normal. That's what happens with companies at that stage. And I think this also sort of then reflected a bit in how the company did talent processes. So the focus at that time was very much, let's have a great employee experience. Let's focus on the employee life cycle, and let's really look at the key sort of milestones in that. So it was a lot of generalist HR team members and some COE teams focusing on hiring, onboarding, employee experience, L&D, D&I, performance and pay reviews, of course, mobility, and then special projects and so on. And that was sort of the setup that we had 3 years ago. So, and I mean, I think a very important piece of the puzzle, which we need to sort of talk about now in the context of this session, is we did not have a global HRMS. We did not have a global performance management system. And we did not have a global people analytics system or even a people analytics team. And a lot of this was just like the business, sort of federated across the markets, across multiple systems, multiple databases, and so on and so forth. So it was a very interesting setup to walk into and plenty of potential to work with.
Yeah, thank you. It's really interesting, and it's your journey obviously happened pretty quickly across that time. I remember when we were first speaking, kind of the growth of the company just boomed in 7 years, effectively. In your experience, though, what are the biggest reasons why such transformations fail? I think there's a statistic that nearly 70% of transformations fail. So what was your formula for getting the transformation off to the right start?
Yeah, it's a very good point. And actually, interestingly enough, the statistics of 70% of transformations failing also applies to sort of major system rollouts. A lot of them also fail. And surprisingly enough, the results or the root causes of this failure or this widespread failure of these sorts of initiatives is actually quite common. I think a lot of times what happens is people go into transformations or major system buys and rollouts with a very financially focused use case. And there is not enough due diligence and homework done before sort of taking the decision. So if I think about a very basic sort of playbook of a few things that you should always think about. One is, where are we as a business? So, and what are we as a business? Are we a customer focused B2C company? Are we an enterprise focused B2B company? Are we a global Fortune 500 company? Are we a mid-sized company that's focused in one region? Are we a small company that's still in hyper-growth mode? And then sort of looking at doing our homework, internal and external, right? What are we trying to solve internally from a business perspective, from a people perspective? And what are other people doing externally, and how can we learn from them to not reinvent the wheel, but also make sure that we have the best information possible to make our decisions, rather than get the information from just one or two sources, or from a consultant we bring in from the outside. And only once you've done all of that and done all that homework can you really go into the planning phase of saying, we need to sort of plan a certain transformation or system buy and roll out. And then it's much easier to sort of say, okay, maybe we know which part of the market we want to focus on, or what area of the business we want to transform, how we want to do it, what the key results are that we want to achieve out of it. And then finally comes the business case and, all those other things, the due diligence, the sort of demos and all those other things that we do in that cycle. And on top of all of that, that's when you start to do your change management, project management, and all those other disciplines we talk about. And then you roll out and measure, improve. So I think it's the classic engineering trope of 80% of problems in anything you do, any product you create, come from design problems, not operational problems. So I think a lot of transformations fail because not enough attention is paid to the design stage, the why are we doing this, and what exactly do we need to do, and what results do we want to achieve.
It's actually really interesting, because I speak to a lot of organizations at this stage where they've realized there's a problem, or they realize that there's something that they want to solve. And I actually think you've just given me food for thought, because I think a lot of them probably fail or don't proceed when they almost go too quickly, perhaps, to present the business case to the board. It happens quite often, they'll have a demo of BetterWorks or whatever it may be and get really excited about it, and then rush to build a business case and present it. But actually, from what I'm hearing from your side, you actually took real time to pull everything together and do your research and find your why and find the impact. So that resonated with me, and I think will probably resonate with a lot of people on the call today. So then when you get to that point of building the business case to secure buy-in, what other advice would you give HR professionals who might struggle with this? Because it definitely seems a sticking point often when we get to that business case approval. We're making the case. Often we're obviously battling for financial budgets, but also often we're working with IT to understand the potential, because we know IT often very keen to minimize solutions out there and keep everything as consolidated as possible. So what other advice, aside from maybe taking more time, would you give to HR professionals who are kind of navigating all those different conflicting interests?
That's the $1 million question, Amy. Yeah. So it's sort of, I can go on for hours about this because I'm very passionate about the topic. But for me, if I have to give advice in a capsule, there are 3 major variables that HR leaders must look at. And let's transformation is a very big topic. So let's focus on, let's say, procuring a system like BetterWorks, right? Mm-hmm. There are 3 major things that we need to look at as HR leaders when making this decision. And of course, it goes without saying that we need to enroll the business, not just finance, but the tech folks, as well as the business leaders of the company overall in this decision making. But there are 3 variables that interact, right? So variable number 1 is adoption. So we talk about the system has this business case, the system has that business case, it automates things, it does AI, it does this, it does that. And then it gives us these great metrics, this great data, and we can change the world with this, and HR will become a strategic function, seat at the table, et cetera, et cetera. We've been reading all these things for the past 20 years. But here's the thing. Adoption by the actual users is probably the single most important thing that should drive your business case. Because if the system is not used by employees and people managers and business leaders, who are ultimately the consumers of that system, it doesn't matter how good the analytics coming out of the system is. It doesn't matter how automated it is. It's an uphill battle. You won't get people using the system. So the people team will be chasing everyone and wasting a lot of time. You won't get the right data into it because people will do a half-hearted job of using the system. And then everything that comes out of it will reflect all of these problems. And in some of the worst case scenarios, you actually have systems where people believe everything, roll it out, and then the adoption rate is so low that after one cycle, the system is switched off and never used again, even though the cost on the licenses is sunk, the contract is signed, et cetera, et cetera. So adoption is absolutely critical from a business case perspective. And in fact, it'll be interesting for you. Well, you already know this, but for the folks listening today to know this, that BetterWorks actually went over the line in first place in our process because of adoption. We were confident BetterWorks would have the best adoption by users to actually drive our decision to procure BetterWorks for performance management. So that's number one. Number two, the financials. So if you talk to tech people, the one sort of phrase that everyone here needs to learn and know is total cost of ownership. So when you talk about total cost of ownership, it basically means what's the cost of actually buying, implementing, and maintaining a system. It doesn't just mean the license fees and hosting fees if it's an on-premise system, but it also means rolling it out and all the collateral you create, the people cost of actually rolling the system out, the change management cost, maintaining that setup, who's doing your back office, who's pulling the data, and who's doing the integration with other stuff in your tech stack, and so on and so forth. But for me, that is all very well, but the single biggest needle mover in my experience in terms of total cost of ownership is actually people cost. So I'll give you an example, and I actually credit an HR leader I spoke to long ago from a certain company. I'm not going to take their name. They actually completely blew my mind when I spoke to them because everybody told me, hey, let's implement employee and manager self-service. It reduces the HR team cost and headcount, and therefore it's a cost saving. And this person turned around and said, actually, we religiously oppose doing that because the work is not happening in a vacuum. Business leaders and people managers and employees have to pick up that work, and they're not using that system every day. So they're not expert users like HR professionals. And therefore, there's a massive amount of time wastage created by systems that are rolled out that are not user-friendly and that are not easy to use. So let me do simple math here for you. We roll out a system where the business case is, it takes 10 minutes to do a transaction. There are X number of transactions. There are 10 HR people who are doing these transactions. And now these transactions will move to self-service, to employees, to managers, and to business leaders. And these 10 HR people, if we sort of over time remove those roles from the team, that saves us $1 million, right? That's the typical use case. Now, what happens is if you're really looking at it from a balanced perspective, you then say, okay, I do a time and motion study and I see when managers and employees are doing self-service, how much time does it take for them to do the same transaction? How many HR people, business partners, people ops, etc., they go to help them do that transaction? And what is the total estimated cost of that work and that commitment that is needed to make the system work? And more often than not, that number both in hours and in dollar terms, is significantly higher than the cost of HR people doing those transactions in the system. So you have to be extremely careful that your financial case is looking at both sides of the equation before and after in terms of time invested and minimizing the time invested after. Otherwise, the financial case often doesn't work. Finally, and I think this is much more tech and much more intuitive, you need to make sure that the system is able to integrate with sort of whatever tech stack you have, your core HRMS. Ideally, it has some AI functionality. The AI functionality doesn't need to be game-changing that the system will do everything for you. It can be something as simple as it helps employees write reviews, like in BetterWorks, or it helps managers assess feedback in summarized form and then use that to write reviews for employees and assessments for employees, because this is where the real time saving comes up. This is where the real convenience comes up, and it drives up adoption and it reduces the time invested in that process. So it has a double benefit, even though it may not be as cool as saying this AI will take, 2 prompts that you put in and suddenly, print out the Holy Bible for you. So I think these are the 3 key things I look for when making a case: adoption, real calculation on total cost of ownership, and the right integration, AI, and other helpful things to make it fit well into your environment, our environment as a company, and our tech stack.
Really interesting. I think you might be getting a few LinkedIn connects after this session and some advice requests, because that was really fascinating. And I think, speaking to the adoption and the AI piece, like especially when you're a cool company like HelloFresh's and you're trying to hire the best young talent out there, and that people are used to seeing things that are easy to use and that are fun to use with some of the AI in there. So aside from the real business metrics, we just want to engage a tool that is cool and fun. So we always love working with companies that are a very kind of similar cultural fit to us, because there's always this just fun energy between the 2 companies, which we appreciate. In terms of measuring success, so we've spoken about the business case and how you pull that together. Let's say we've implemented or we're in the process of implementing. What are the early signs that things might be going off track? Perhaps, again, it comes down to adoption, but then how transparent should you be about that progress if it's not quite going the way that you hope it to?
Yeah, good question, Amy. Look, I think there's a couple of things that I would generally do from the perspective of sort of measuring success and staying on track. I think one is obviously, if we've done the homework, we know what we're trying to achieve, as we just talked about a little while back. We would know what the key success factors are, and we would sort of be managing towards them. We would be tracking them, and we would have ideally somebody who owns the rollout of the system during the initial sort of hypercare period, but then after that as well, and is really sort of looking at how we are tracking on those key success metrics. Even if it's early days, you can sort of get a good read of what direction things are going, and you can sort of say, hey, it's red light, amber light, green light kind of thing. It doesn't have to be exact decimal point based metrics, because these things play out generally over a period of time and over a couple of cycles in terms of measuring success. So I would say the key success factors, for sure, I think we already start tracking them directionally. The second thing I sort of encourage is having checkpoints with project teams who are the ones who are implementing it, but also the handover and sort of the folks who are now managing the tool and maintaining it, and sort of just have a checkpoint with them to see, hey, what was it like in the initial period, and then after handover and going into business as usual mode, sort of maintenance mode, what are things like now? Checking with your provider, your partner who's providing the system, to see what they're seeing on their side, checking with a couple of key people in the tech team and a couple of business leaders, couple of key HR leaders, depending on which part of the people team is using that tool the most, just to sort of get a sense of what their general experience is like and whether they've spotted anything. Are there any red flags? Are things going well? And so on. And so it's more human intelligence, as people would say, anecdotal rather than very data driven. But then also, I think there are two things that sort of are more formal things that I would do. So one is more on the data side. If you remember, we talked about sort of the three key factors in the business case: the adoption, the financials, and the tech side of the house. So really going into the system with the help of your partner as well as your tech team, and looking and sort of whoever's owning the reporting from that tool as well, if it's not in the tech team, and really looking at the usage patterns, the analytics that come out of that to measure adoption, right? So who's using it more, who's using it less? Is there any country or market where there is heavy usage or light usage, which is an outlier from the global average? And then diving deeper into that and managing by outlier to see what trends you can spot in terms of what's going well and what's not going well. I think the second thing, from a financial perspective, the licenses are generally sort of just running. The installation is running, so it's just a question of looking at the budget, making sure everything is aligned. And if there is an activation of extra support from the partner, or from any other party externally, or from in-house IT people, understanding why this extra support is being mobilized and why these people are coming in. And of course, the final and very important piece, Amy, is doing some focus groups with actual users, employees and managers, just to get a view of the customer experience and how things are going and what tweaks need to be made, whether it's on the tool or the supporting collateral and setup around it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, and obviously your partner, in this case, Betterwork, should help with all of those things as well. We're running out of time, which is so sad. So looking ahead, we started by reflecting on HelloFresh 3 years ago. Where do you see HelloFresh in 3 years when we obviously return to this stage, although we won't leave it 3 years, but let's imagine.
Well, I mean, I always speak in threes, so this is easy. I think the company is growing, it's profitable, bigger and better than ever. I think we have best-in-class products for our customers and a best-in-class experience. And we're working really hard on that right now to take it to the next level. And finally, of course, we have a really high-performing, really engaged, really happy workforce, which continues to not dread performance reviews.
Great. Thank you so much, Abbas, for such an honest and insightful conversation. I'll personally continue as a customer and fan of HelloFresh for many years. And definitely before we wrap, everyone should stay with us, because up next are the Make Work Better Awards, where we're celebrating organizations, and HelloFresh is one of those. So thank you, Abbas.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Thank you all. Bye.